That sounds crazy. I'm only pouring water though. You my patient PSA. Oh, y'all can't even see it. Y'all can't even see it good. You my patient PSA podcast mug. And I'm wearing my Kablooey Pow Pow shirt because the episode low key almost went Kablooey Pow Pow. Let's roll the theme music. Passion public service announcement. Passionate. Let me tell you something. So what is this Passion PSA podcast? Who am I? Well, they call me Passion, short for passion no last necessary. Why is there no last name necessary? Because the first name says it all. I am passion and all that embodies. What do I do here? I give you the life coaching that you know you need, but don't enroll yourself in. When did I start? Actually, 2017. I'd leave a PSA on my Instagram regarding something I'd observed, and now we've evolved to this. Why do I do it? Why not? If even one person is able to take away one thing that changes their life, someone else's life, or changes the world for the better, then I've done what I was charged to do. So come on in, sit and listen for a while. There's something here for everyone at the Passion PSA podcast. Greetings and salutations, my beloved passionates, newcomers, visitors, and guests. Welcome to the second to last episode of season 3 of the Passion PSA podcast, where I, passion no last necessary, your Get You Right Guru, issue a weekly public service announcement about whatever I've observed or was on my mind. This is a for your consideration zone where the objective is to offer you a perspective you may not have previously considered to both A, expand your thinking, and B, aid you in becoming a better version of yourself, and for others. This is a safe space, but not necessarily a delicate one. I will never rob you of your right to feel what you feel. The same way I will not sugarcoat whatever it is that I have to say. The goal is to get you to higher, more expanded thinking so you can operate as your highest and best self. Each week, prior to getting into the topic, we take about 60 seconds to make affirmations to intentionally raise the vibration to ensure that regardless of what we may discuss and how it may make you feel, we have intentionally started on the highest possible vibration and correct frequency. You're always welcome to repeat after me or to use this time to state your own affirmations. I need some water because it's hot in here. I am open to feedback. I welcome growth. I encourage the growth of those around me. I respond instead of reacting. I release anyone and anything that finds me hindering. I open my heart for love to flow in. Wellness flows to me. Wellness flows through me. Wellness flows from me. It is well. I am well. All is well. Well is all. Ashe, ashe, ashe. Passioners, do you remember when that sound went viral last year? If I'm too much, go find less. It went super crazy, and up until now, people are still using it in everyday arguments, and they're still attaching the sound to their reels and their TikToks. And it's a valid point, right? If I'm too much of whatever and I'm so unmanageable, go find something more your speed, right? And I think most of us, or I should probably say many of us, so that the fortunate few don't feel lumped into something they've never experienced. But I think that many of us have been there. I know that I have. At one point, I was pining to someone that people should call me too, because at that time, I felt like that was all I ever heard. And I still hear it. You're too sensitive. You're too serious. And because my patience has a shelf life, after I've reached my patience threshold, I believe in abbreviating things. I think that's what the people call petty. But I'm of the ideology that if I'm such a problem for you, don't talk to me. Problem solved. And then that's when they say I'm too extreme. And that's okay too. I'm not into gray area. So if the only resolution is for me not to feel or think as I do, then peace yourself so you can have the peace you feel that I'm taking from you. So I completely understand the concept of go find less. And I was going to do a reel using that same audio, but I was slow on the draw. So it ended up buried somewhere in my save folder, and I still haven't located it. And I'm glad that it disappeared from my access, because it gave me some time to really turn that statement over. And then I started picturing it. And even as I was writing about this, I could remember a relationship that ended very disastrously, where that wasn't the directive, but it was most certainly the result. And while that might sound shady, it's the truth. I was too much, so he went and found less. And he told me as much, right? But that's neither here nor there, nor my cross to bear. My point is that I thought about the ramifications of someone going to find less. And there are levels to that, y'all. For example, if starting and running your own business is too much, the less would be working for someone else. And it is easier than being a business owner. You can show up and do whatever kind of job you do, because a lot of folks are doing a trash job, but they find time and area to judge and complain about the job someone else is doing. Complain about all that you don't get and that the company doesn't do, then go home after 8 hours. And either weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, you get a check regardless. Depending on the job you take, you don't have to go find your own insurance. You don't have to work 24 hours a day. You don't wonder if you'll make any money this week, this month, this quarter, this year. And as an employee, if the lights get cut off, you could talk about who didn't do what, but you don't have to stress about how or when you'll get them back on. You get to talk about how much you do when you don't do nearly as much as you would if all the responsibility was on you. So by comparison, being an employee is way less stressful than being an owner. But being an employee means you have to answer to someone. It means your paid time off is decided for you. And if you exceed the allotted time, your job could be in jeopardy. You could have a whole team of incompetent leadership, but they're still the decision makers. The hours may not work for you, but you still have to work for the hours. So owning the business requires that much more, but long term, the potential reward is so much greater. And I say that as someone who enjoys instant gratification. I say that as someone who works daily on reprogramming myself so that I'm speaking using the most upstream language while navigating my current conditioning, which includes a lot of unintended negative speak, which is the lot of the vast majority. I say that as someone who looks at herself and sees how much work still has to be done on all sides, despite whatever work may have already been done. Y'all see the podcast and the clips, and I see the podcast, but I see it as one leg of a business that has so many moving parts, and I'm responsible for initiating the movement and maintaining the momentum. So while the schedule of the job can be inconvenient, sometimes the check makes just being an employee seem a little bit more appealing. The social life, the travel life, the being able to watch shows without guilt. Yeah. Me and R's and W's at the same time, it's a thing. So this is like take 3 or 4. Me trying to say this statement. All of that requires me to do and be less to yield a right now reward. But if the trade-off is another 2 years of navigating these growing pains, on the other side of that 2 years is all the social and travel and mindless TV watching time I can stand while having a successful business, while scaling a successful business to a successful empire, isn't it worth the juggle right now to keep pushing? And for many, the honest answer will be no. Plot twist. The honest answer will be no, because getting just enough for doing the least or for doing the common will always win over extensive effort that may never yield any other reward other than hard-earned lessons learned. If the payoff isn't the cash and the kriznai, all that extra effort just seems like a lot of work that doesn't have to be done. And they'll get philosophical with it and say that they're just taking the path of least resistance. And I've been there too. Working a job that could have eventually turned my brain into mush because I really had zero stimulation. Like I had to create things to do to keep myself stimulated. I had to create things to do to keep myself awake. And then my sleep schedule was off, right? So when I would get to work, I got there with maybe enough energy to get through the first half of the shift. But then I spent the second half of the shift shaking myself and trying to find anything to watch that would keep my eyes open, trying to get up every few minutes, literally anything, and almost always in vain, because at some point, sleep will not be denied. And then when I got off work, I was so exhausted, I felt like I was going to collapse. And if it wasn't for the fact that I was in a car, I would have collapsed in the street several times. But that's another story for another time. Point is, while I did have some interaction, the conversations that I had with people who met me in that setting were often straight up offensive, because they would ask me like, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. And while they meant it to be a compliment or a motivator, the truth was that I was making significantly more, doing significantly less. Who opts into working super hard for pennies so the people who can't do what you can but are in a higher position can get paid a multiple or an exponent of your salary because of your hard work? So like so many, I remained because of the convenience of the location and the check. And that was about it. Especially because for everything I did or could do to affect change, there were little to no results. So when the same issues went reported but unaddressed, when everything's either the buck being passed or the pacifying, we're working on it, you lose interest in trying to make improvements, because fighting for better when you're fighting alone feels futile. Anyway, there are those of us who will say a lot of sacrifice right now is absolutely worth the payoff, if the payoff is going to be in 2 to 5 years. Because after that, I don't know. We might need to start looking at something else. And still, there are those who will say greater sacrifice, greater reward, but they're just talking to be heard, saying something that sounds worthwhile. They're not really about that life. Point is, there are already a plethora of people out here ready and willing to do the least, even and especially for the income that sustains them and their family. What more then can you expect of that same person in a relationship? Relationships require effort, sacrifice, letting some things go that sometimes you just can't seem to shake, being upfront about some things you'd really rather not talk about, and being indirect or more tactful or diplomatic about some things you'd like to confront head on. They require more effort than our first relationships, which are familial, right? Mother's love, grandma's love. While they might not always feel unconditional, they are enduring. And that dad bond is a best friend, ally, advocate when mean mommy is mommying. And of course, we know that not everyone has had the same kind of nurturing. But the point is, the first bonds that we form, whether they're parental, sibling, or even extended family, they often don't require us to actually show up intentionally, because there's an expectancy of the other person still being there. There's an expectancy of them still being yours, regardless of your behavior. But relationships require humility when wrong and humility when right. They require tolerance. They require engagement. Being in a relationship is a whole 24-hour job, and a lot of people in these positions barely want to show up per diem, much less be on call. So this person who is showing up like a typical employee, doing whatever kind of job they're doing, might be good, might be trash, complaining about the requirements of the job, complaining about the working conditions, seeing what everyone else could be doing better or differently while they continue to operate as usual. This person who, when they first took the job, was excited to get to work and may now be totally deflated, because now that they're in the position, they're formulating their own ideas as to why the position was vacant in the first place. This person is probably sticking around out of some type of convenience and for the benefits. And that's about it. And here's you suggesting to this person who is barely showing up mediocre that they go find some mediocrity to match. And while this frees you of them and their complaints about your exorbitant and unrealistic expectations or your burdensome personality, right? Because that's exactly how they sound. It encourages them to find someone who will tolerate and accept that same mediocrity that you escaped. And they may find them. And if the person they find is equally as lackluster with the same kind of expectations of more than they're offering, more discord and disharmony will be sown. These people may reproduce and create offspring who would carry the torch of lackadaisy. Thus, the cycle continues. And while you may have escaped this one person directly, you'll still be impacted by them and their counterparts indirectly. Unhappy people seldom keep their misery to themselves because they generally don't like to see what they don't have. So the indirect impact of encouraging them to find their vibrational match is an increased vibration of a low frequency on a low frequency that now requires increased effort of those who don't want to match that frequency to do everything they can to vibrate higher. Why aren't we encouraging people to go become more? The only people who really understand the value of something have worked for it. You can appreciate and admire the work that someone else has done to achieve or attain something, but seeing the work and actually doing the work are vastly different. The doing is what makes you better. The doing is what builds and strengthens character. Why should someone doing no work be able to benefit from someone who is constantly doing the work? People complain about people who abuse the public assistance system, right? And why? Because working people's tax dollars are funding this system while people, and we're specifically talking about people who are defrauding the system, not people who legitimately need help. People who don't appear to be working on anything are collecting money someone else worked really hard for and never saw. Encouraging someone to go find less encourages them to remain the same. It encourages them to do the same, to give the same effort. Encouraging someone to become more challenges them to do the work. Them telling you you're too much implies you should become less to become more palatable for them. And sometimes your too much is simply a blinding reminder of their inadequacy, and that's the real reason they're complaining. It's easier for them to tell you to become less because there's no work in it for them. Now, are there cases where too much is legitimately a problem? Of course. Too violent? You need to chill before somebody Sparta kicks you in your chest. Too miserable and always complaining? Yes. Even people who complain all the time don't want to be around someone who's always complaining because it's going to bring their mood down. You too lie? Talk truth. Nobody trusts somebody whose words always have to be taken with a grain of salt. You too loud? You ever talk to someone who spoke so loudly they made your ears ring? Because I have. And in those cases, the suggestion for the other person to become more would be ludicrous. No one's going to start fighting more or want to always have to be ready to fight because you need anger management. No one is volunteering for tinnitus because you want to talk like you have a bullhorn in your throat. But here's a secondary plot twist. A lot of these people that are telling you you're too much don't actually want you at less because they can't handle that either. I remember working with my middle schoolers. And if you ever worked with middle schoolers, you know that that is a special demographic that truly requires the patience of Job. Anyway, there was a day when they were acting as crazy as they always do, and I gave them less. There was no yelling. There was no scolding. There was no energy. And they were like, Miss Passion, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you yelling? And I told them straight up, for what? You don't care, so why should I? Y'all don't want to listen. Y'all want to do what you feel like doing, so whatever. We'll just stand here. It makes no difference to me. And the response? Miss Passion, I don't like you like that. Miss Passion always yelling was a problem until Miss Passion stopped yelling because the loving energy that was behind the discipline and correction, the energy behind the yelling went out the window with the yelling. You can't want someone to be them and also control how much of them they are. Passion is, I started this episode and got like 3/4 of the way through it. And then I started questioning whether I was making sense. I read it, reread it. I started moving things around. I started deleting things. I started adding them back. Then I started doing additional research. I questioned if my position was a good one or if I needed to rethink it. I thought about whether I should toss it all together or shelf it and revisit it at a later date. I thought about whether I had something else I could just put out real quick. Then I said, you're overthinking this. Then I said, that's not actually how I feel, but I know that would be the feedback from someone else. Then I thought about how in line with this subject my whole process had been. I've been told more times than I can count that I think too much. And there are times when that was helpful because my thinking was advancing to worry, and worry is nothing but stressing over a possibility that may never come to pass. But in times like this, there would still be someone saying, don't overthink it, just put it out. But if I put it out and it doesn't meet my standards or my expectations, I'm still going to be dissatisfied. So I'd rather put it out late and at a standard that I find acceptable than put it out on time and be embarrassed or disappointed in myself because the quality wasn't there. So after I stopped looking for an out, after I stopped looking at and thinking about how hard this was, how much this was, after I stopped looking into how I could do and find less, I challenged myself to become better. I challenged myself not to give up. I challenged myself to dig a little deeper and see it through. There are some things in people's personalities that will simply clash with ours. We could dig down to Dante's Inferno and we'll just never find the thing that will make them tolerable or acceptable. But there are a lot of things in others' personalities that really aren't so unnavigable if we just have the conversation. If we just say, when you do this, this is what you'll get from me because I simply will not entertain that. At that point, they'll know our terms and conditions and we'll have our SOPs in place, and that will substantiate why we're responding the way we are. Some people are 100% telling us that our behaviors are too much for our own well-being, right? They're too violent, they're always complaining, they're too rude, they're too miserable. When they're telling us that we're too much for them, that our behavior is more than they can or are willing to navigate, to experience, or to take on, we have to look past the offense of that. Don't send them to find less. Don't even send them to find someone just like them because they'll have a hard time looking in that mirror. And then they'll be right back to telling someone else about all the too much that they are or do. Wish them growth. I'm too sensitive. May you become better equipped to interact with sensitive people. I'm too slow. May you become more patient. I'm doing too much by always carrying the just in case items in my bag. May you soon realize the value of being prepared for the unexpected. I know it can feel like an attack when someone or multiple people are telling you that something or some things about you are too much or they could be better if. We don't have to counterattack though. We can consider what they said, take a beat to see if we feel like anything they've said has real validity, and then respond. I don't have to throw them away or tell them that they cannot speak to me because that's not on the higher end of the emotional intelligence spectrum, allegedly. And you don't have to tell them to find less. Encourage them to become more. That's the whole point of this journey that we're all on. So what say you, Passionates? Are you up for the challenge? Or are you going to tell them to go straight to hell because you never liked them anyway? You know, you can always keep it a buck with me. I won't judge. I'm still working out my kinks too. Feel free to drop your comments, questions, concerns, commendations, compliments, or criticisms below. Listener letters can be sent to my brilliant friend passion@gmail.com. Whether you are viewing or listening on your preferred podcast platform, please like, subscribe, turn on notifications, share. Help me help others help themselves. If you would like to become a financial contributor, donations can be made via Podbean, PayPal, Cash App, Linktree, or Zelle. All the links are in the description box. Every little bit helps. It all goes back into the pod. And with that, your Get You Right Guru is signing off. Y'all go forth. Be great. Be filled with bliss. Be armed and empowered with knowledge. Remember that Some things that hurt your feelings aren't necessarily false. Every observation isn't an attack, and every attack doesn't have to be met with a counterattack. Instead of giving them the green light to find less so they can stay less, encourage them to go find more in themselves. Encourage them to grow and be better. And you do the same. In all things, be passionate. See you later.